Hi everyone. Today we're going to share some heartwarming and thrilling stories with you. Let's listen to a girl's story about what happened to her and her stepbrother. My name is Lily, and I am 20 years old. I live with my father and stepmother, and I have a brother named John who my stepmother brought home. Although I have a new family and my father remarried, I didn't give it much thought at the time because everything went smoothly. My stepmother and John both loved me very much, and they always helped me and talked to each other, which made me feel very happy and warm. I assumed that we would have a peaceful life like that, where every morning the whole family ate breakfast together, my stepmother prepared the food, and my father sat next to me, asking about the little things in life. John never made me feel uncomfortable. He was always attentive and helped me with everything. Even though we had just recently moved in together, I felt really loved and cared for. We even watched movies and spoke, and everything was great. I couldn't think of anything else than those serene times, from studying to little family matters. Despite being new, my stepmother Al always looked after me as if she were my biological mother. And my father was a serious man who loved his family. JN remained the same. He was extremely kind to me, and I didn't have to worry about anything since everything went well and I thought we would always be happy. I was taking a shower when I heard the bathroom door open slightly, which startled me because I thought I could relax knowing that nothing was wrong. It was a minor change that I couldn't immediately explain, but it left me with a lingering feeling. That day, I went to the bathroom as usual without giving it much thought, but in my hurry, I forgot to lock the bathroom door as usual. I quickly turned around, but not before the door opened wider and I saw John standing there. His eyes were no longer the same close, kind eyes as before. Instead, they were cold and strange, as if he had just witnessed something wrong or as if he didn't know what to do with himself. A second before he left, I noticed a look of awkwardness and confusion in his eyes. I didn't understand what was going on. I just felt as though I was stuck in an inexplicable moment. I had finished my work and left the bathroom, but the strange feeling persisted. I kept asking myself, did I do something wrong? And whether there was something between us that had changed that I hadn't noticed. After that day, things started to change so gradually that I couldn't notice at first because those changes seemed so slight and subtle that I initially thought I was imagining things. But then I started to notice this change more clearly when he looked at me. His eyes were no longer kind and close like they had been before, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but I had the weird feeling that he wasn't looking at me as his sister anymore. His eyes swept over me, no longer warm and affectionate, as if he was trying to convey something strange and hard to understand. At times, he even looked at me strangely, as if he was trying to control sensitive. JN seemed the same as usual, but whenever he glanced at me, his eyes appeared to change. At first, I didn't really notice, supposing that perhaps I was something I didn't understand at first, thinking it was just my oversensitivity or that I was just dreaming. But after a few encounters, those strange feelings were no longer just in my head. His eyes started to change the way he looked at me, no longer having the warm gaze of an older brother for his younger sister. Instead, there were moments when his eyes became strange, as if he was hiding something or was experiencing an emotion that I couldn't explain. Additionally, behaviors started to shift. He used to talk to me more often, sharing everything from serious stories to trivial things. But these days our conversations are short and sparse. When I try to start a conversation, he only gives me a vague response before going silent, as if he was trying to avoid me. In particular, when we sat down to eat together, I could clearly feel an invisible wall slowly being built between us. He no longer took the initiative to sit next to me, and he stopped laughing and joking like we used to. There was an odd aura all about us. That night, when my parents were away, I felt an unnamed anxiety rising in my heart. The house was quiet, and only John and I were left. It seemed like everything had changed. I sat in my room trying to solve a problem that I couldn't understand. In fact, I had been trying all afternoon, but I couldn't figure it out. I had assumed that everything would pass and return to its original orbit, but it didn't. I didn't want to trouble my brother since I couldn't explain the foggy barrier between us, but I couldn't fix the matter on my own, so all I could think about at the moment was asking him. Every time I thought of John, I felt as though he was trying to avoid me. I was concerned about whether he would be as willing to help me as he had been in the past, so I got up and went to his room. The feeling of confusion made me want to go back, but I knew that if I didn't ask him, I couldn't solve the problem, so I took a deep breath, knocked on his door, and when John's voice came from inside, I swallowed and opened the door, stepping in with a little heavy feet. He looked up at me from the desk, his eyes suddenly strange, no longer the usual warmth and kindness, but he didn't show any discomfort, just asked a straightforward question. "What's the matter?" After a moment of hesitation, I pursed my lips and said, "I have a math problem that I don't understand. Can you help me?" The atmosphere in the room suddenly became tense and cold, and I realized that there was no longer the closeness like before. Every time he touched the paper or pointed to a point on the problem, I felt an invisible distance as if he was trying not to get close to me. He nodded, invited me to sit down, and started teaching, but there was something that made me uncomfortable throughout the process. He spoke clearly, but occasionally I caught his eyes glancing away as if he was trying to avoid me. Too near to me. After he had successfully solved my problem, I was about to get up and head back to my room when my hand was abruptly snatched. I was shocked and turned to face him. I called his name softly, and JN held my hand very firmly. His eyes were no longer cold, but instead were filled with a strange determination. We stared at each other for a moment without saying anything. I felt like an invisible wall was slowly coming down between us, and my heartbeat was accelerating. Choked, I couldn't take my eyes off his hand that was firmly gripping mine as I stood there, my heart racing. John gave me a stern, serious look, but his eyes were full of a resolve I had never seen before. Not the look of a brother confronting his sister, but the look of someone trying to persuade me to do something I couldn't comprehend. He remained silent for a while, staring at me as though he was considering something significant, and I felt my heart tighten in fear, gradually getting up as though I were standing at. After a long period of silence, John said softly but seriously, "Lily, I like you. I can't continue to pretend like everything is normal. I want you to stay with me. I want us to be together." I stood there in shock, unable to believe what I had just heard. My brother had said something that couldn't possibly be true. I wanted to say something, but my throat was choked, unable to do so in that moment. Everything in the small room suddenly became stiflingly heavy. Our family's unexpected breakup left me feeling lightheaded and immobile, unable to move and only able to stare at him as though I were in a nightmare from which I was unable to awaken. JN kept speaking quietly, as though he were revealing something profound that I couldn't fathom. "I can't stop thinking about you like this every night since I saw you taking a bath, Lily. I know I shouldn't, but I can't stop. You don't understand, but I want you to be with me forever." His words were like a smack in the face. The expression jolting me out of my reverie. I felt coldness and weirdness instead of affection when I stared into his eyes. "No, John," I exhaled with all my strength to say. "No, John, this can't be happening. You can't say such things." My brother, the man I loved and trusted, was saying these words in an attempt to push away the fear that was rising in me, but my limbs felt like they were nailed to the floor. I tried to pull my hand away from his, but he held it tighter, his eyes darkening as if he couldn't accept my refusal. He persisted in saying, "You don't understand, Lily. I want you to stay with me. I can't live without you." I felt as though I was suffocating and couldn't breathe due to the tension in the room. Everything seemed to lose its clarity around me, and my racing heartbeat was the only sound. As if in amazement, he released go of my hand after I took a big breath in an attempt to calm the panic in my heart and shouted louder and more forcefully, saying, "Brother, stop this. This is not happening. You can't do this to me ever." Hands staring at me in disbelief as though he had just come to a horrible realization. "I apologize, Lily." He continued in a quiet, weak voice, "I didn't mean to scare you like that." I just stood there, feeling as though all of my power had been sapped. I wanted to leave this room as soon as possible because my heart was in a lot of pain, but before I could do so, I said, "One more time, you need to get help, John. This isn't normal. I can't stay if this keeps up." He stood motionless and said nothing more. I turned around and hurried out of the room. When I closed the door, I couldn't stop thinking about what had just transpired since my mind was racing with unresolved questions. I hurriedly shut my room's door, sat down, and clutched my head as though everything were falling apart all around me. How could this have happened? How did things get to be this way? I had a lot of questions, but I couldn't find the answers. I simply sat there in the dark room by myself, terrified and powerless. After that day, everything changed, and I could sense that JN and I were no longer in a relationship. I no longer dare to look him in the eye after that incident. Even though we still live under the same roof, the closeness, the comfortable conversations, and the evenings spent eating together were gone. Instead, there was a vague, heavy distance between us like an invisible curtain, and every time we met, I felt like I was standing on a cliff, and even a slight wind could knock me down. He no longer took the initiative to talk to me or ask me questions, unlike before. He had an odd way of looking at me, as if he were looking at someone I couldn't comprehend. I tried to avoid him as if time would mend our relationship, but the more I avoided him, the more I realized that everything was slowly falling apart and that there was no way to return to how things had been. He never apologized after everything ended, and his silence was like a huge wound that was getting deeper and deeper inside of me. There was a part of me that still hoped it was all a nightmare, but the longer I endured that silence, the more I understood that we were turning into two entirely different people. Every time I tried to speak with him, he would simply respond vaguely and then stop talking, turning the stories of the past into unfillable voids. My stepmother was unaware of the changes in my relationship with John. She continued to believe that we just stopped talking to one another for a while, as if it were a typical family event. Sometimes, she would ask me honestly while wearing a worried expression, "Are you two angry with each other?" she would ask. "Why don't you talk or have fun?" I used to be able to laugh it off and tell her that it was nothing more than a small matter, but I knew deep down that there was no such thing as a small matter, so every time she asked, I had to